You're listening to the Bruins Forrcheck podcast. You can support the show by commenting, liking, and subscribing to our YouTube channel at Bruins Forrcheck, or by leaving 5 stars and a comment on iTunes, Apple, Amazon, and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find and listen to your favorite podcast. The Bruins Forrcheck. Remember, it's F-O-R-R for number 4, Bobby Orr. And now, here is your host, Dave Daniello. Enjoy this week's show.
Hey guys, it's Dave here with the Bruins Forrcheck podcast. We're going to call this our Super Bowl edition, and I am super excited. I've got my former assistant coach, Matt Ferris, here with us, and he's going to join us for this episode. So, Matt, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. It's really cool to be here. This is something I've always wanted to do. It's kind of fun. Me personally, I grew up in the area, Seattle area, down in Olympia mostly, but I played hockey in Seattle for Seattle Junior. I played junior hockey in Bremerton, where you had the Admirals. They were called the Tomahawks back then. Then I played a little bit of Junior A in Manitoba, a couple of different spots. Winkler Flyers for a little bit, and the Wayway Sea Capo Wolverines for a little bit. So that was an interesting experience. And I played college hockey at Utah State, ACHA. I was there for 5 years. And then after that, I had the opportunity to play a little bit of semi-pro, just some real small stuff in Danville, Illinois for the Dashers and the FPHL. So I played hockey, since I was 5 years old, 4 years old, and been around the ice for years and years and years and tons of hours of practice. And then when I got done playing pro, semi-pro, pro is a strong word for what it was, but it was fun. I got back to Bremerton and decided to go back and coach a junior team or help coach a junior team for the Warriors for a while. And then you came along, what year was that? I forget, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And that's where I met you. And so I was doing that for a while, and we've both stepped away since then, but it was fun, and it was great to meet you and be around that team and that experience, and just loved it. So good to be here.
Well, I appreciate it, Matt. And then that was 2018, 2019. And if you remember right, I mean, we had to put that team together very, very quickly. The league had approached me, I think, in June of that year, and I had from June to September or so. September, maybe begin season, I think, started in October. So we only had 2 or 3 months to really put that team together, and that was quite a chore. And we started training camp with, I think, 23 guys, which was kind of special. That was tough.
Yeah. I laugh about it because I had no idea who you were, and we were in the NORPAC for a while, and then maybe something else. But the team in Bremerton was a couple of different team names, a couple of different coaches, 3 or 4 years, and almost folding here and there. And it was never really that. I mean, it was always organized, but it was never really that stable. And then from where you and I started, I didn't even know you. And then I was always impressed with your I've always told people that your go-getter mentality. We started with almost nothing, and all of a sudden we had 20-something guys, and you're living in a hotel and going at it. And it was just a fun experience. And
I
really enjoyed it. It was fun.
I forgot about that, living in Bremerton in the hotel during the season.
The Oyster Bay.
Yeah, Oyster
Bay Inn, right by my current work now. Yeah, it was fun.
So, no, that was awesome. We had a good time. I look back at that. We didn't win a lot of games that year. It was tough trying to, build a culture and put that team together that quickly, right? We had some good players, and I just don't think we had time enough as a group to really build the culture that we really needed to build. We needed 2 or 3 years of what we started. We had a competitive team. I mean, we would lose some games. We lost a couple of games by, maybe double digits to some really, really good teams. But most of the games, against Seattle especially, we beat Seattle a couple of times. And when we lost, we'd lose by 2 or 3 goals or 1 or 2 goals. It was the bigger teams like Fresno. I remember when Fresno came in, we took them into overtime the first night on Friday night, and then on Sunday they beat us by like 10-1 or something. We weren't very deep, we had one or two lines. Really think that team really had two lines, and we just couldn't keep up through the whole game.
For sure. And I think that, like you mentioned, we rarely got beat bad. We were in a lot of games, particularly in the division. Some of those teams in California and the big teams in Utah, the league. I always call it kind of the Wild West because there was no real, at least from my perspective, and I didn't deal with numbers and paperwork like you did, but there was no real rules on what you could do with a
No.
guy and pay a guy hush hush and so for a guy like you who, to your credit, came up there and did that out of your own dime and own nickel, and there's owners in California that own 12 businesses and have all the money in the world to throw at some European player, and so I was always impressed just how well it came together and how well it really was for where it started. Like I said, we didn't get crushed too many games. When we won, I forget our record. We probably had 10, 12 wins. Maybe not. Maybe I'm way off. I don't know. But
No,
I
you're
feel like
pretty
it was,
close.
yeah, I had a lot of fun that year. I really enjoyed it. For what it was, I thought it was pretty organized. It was good.
Well, and let me tell you, well, you talk about small market, big market teams, right? You're a sports guy, so you get this, especially in baseball. We were playing teams like the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees, and we were the A's. I
Yes,
mean,
very much
we
so.
we did everything on a nickel, and where everybody else was doing shit on a quarter. But that's okay.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. It was a great experience for me. And let me just tell you, if I know I've said this, but I want to make sure that the last month of the season, I got very, very sick, and I had to step away from the team. And you took over that team, and that to me, I tell you what, I never worried. I remember we communicated quite a bit while I
Yeah.
was home because I mean I was really sick. I swear to you, I had COVID before COVID was a thing, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
it was bad. I mean, I had I struggled a little bit there for a month or so, and especially being away from the team. So I mean, I was really down. But you stepped up, man. You stepped up, and you were able to, you know, do enough. I know you have a family at home and all that, and a job, and you had to somehow make it work, and I really really appreciate that. Just to get the
Yeah.
teams on the field.
I appreciate that. I do remember one trip where we, after that happened, and we had to go to Medford, and of course we didn't have a bus driver because you were sick.
Yeah,
So, so I remember we had to get a bunch of vans, and I know I drove one van. I think we had I forget his name, the radio guy with Justin Machine, I believe his name was
just the
Justin something.
machine.
I think he helped drive a van, and we were. I was all. It was. I remember it being just quite the adventurous trip. But yeah, it was fun. I mean, I was happy to step. It was new to me too, as well, being the guy that organizes it all. I was just happy to be the one that kind of helped out, but different experience for me too. But it was fun.
That's awesome.
Here we are on the Bruins podcast, 10 minutes in, and we haven't mentioned the Bruins one time. So
That's okay. This is I'm reminiscing right now. This is good. I don't
yeah,
get
yeah,
to
it's
do this
fun.
very often. And this is a Bruins podcast, but everybody can see that you have a Vancouver Canucks background
I
going
do. Yeah,
right
thank you.
now. And obviously the Bruins just played the Canucks, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But if you don't mind, I'd like to get your take on what you see of the Bruins, from your perspective at least from this season so far.
Sure.
What do you see?
Yeah, sure.
What as a guy that's a Canucks fan that's on the West Coast, how do you perceive the Bruins so far?
Yeah, I think that the thing about the Bruins is that they've been so good for 10, 15 years now, and you got Pasternak and Marchand and those guys, but you lose Krejci and some big players, and so this year, in my head as an outsider, I'm thinking they might regress a little bit, and I guess last year they had 137 points, so I guess they're going to regress some naturally. Who's going to get that many points again? It's pretty hard to do, but even then, I mean, they're still this year they're supposed to have 101 points according to some Vegas numbers, and they just keep plugging away. They when you watch them, and I've watched them the last couple of days because we talked a little bit. They don't blow you away with. I mean, they had a couple bad games as well, but they don't look always that great. But they just find ways to win. They keep winning, and there they sit at the top of the Eastern Conference again. And I mean, I don't like the Bruins, but how can you not be impressed with what they've done the last handful of years, this year included?
Yeah, well, I think going into this year, last year was just a special year. We're not going to talk about that. I mean, I
Well,
don't,
the playoffs were good.
that was the year that's the year they should have won, right? Florida shouldn't have ousted them in the first round of the playoffs. I know they went 7 games, and Florida put on a great run, but with Bergeron and Krejci and guys that you talked about, they should have won last year. At least they should have gotten to the finals. And I think if they would have gotten by Florida, they probably would have. But regardless,
well, Florida did, I think, go to the finals. So very much so.
that's it. But if you look at this year, I wasn't looking for anything great this season. I'll be honest with you. I thought they were going to be a middle of the pack team. I thought there was going to be a little rebuilding process that went along with that. I was unsure about Marchand as being a captain.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, look, in my opinion, Bergeron, and probably a lot of people think this, I feel like he's one of the greatest players to play the game, in my opinion.
For sure.
Not one of the greatest goal scorers, very good goal scorer, could definitely dish the puck. Fantastic center, right? He just knew where to be. Yeah. One of the best defensive centers of all time.
Defensively outstanding. Also very good in the circle too, draws.
Absolutely. But to me, it was his leadership. It was the stuff that he brought to the team. He was the glue that held that team together. And then so when he passed that off to Marchand, Marchand's the rat, right? Like he's the guy. I had a kid that played for me for Vancouver, the Rangers, and his name was Brandon Abb, and he reminds me so much of what Brad Marchand did. He's that one guy that you want on your team, but you don't want to play against.
Absolutely.
And so, but I didn't know if that was going to take away from his captaincy. Does that make sense to you?
Sure. Yeah.
I thought it might tame his game, and it really hasn't. I think it has a little bit. It's tempered him a little bit, and he still takes some bad penalties.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think he's been a good captain. I think he's doing it right. So
yeah, as an outsider, you don't really hear about his antics as much this year, and maybe that's part of the you kind of hear that name and it's a negative connotation to it. He gets up and he licks some guy or whatever, whatever he does. But
right.
But there's been less of that this year, and again, I don't watch. Definitely been less of that, and so he's obviously got him going the right way. They just have a good culture, the Bruins days, and I wish the Canucks could say the same thing.
Well, I got to be honest.
They have made the playoff 7-8 years.
I thought bringing Rick Tocchet in was a joke. I think I had told you that last year. I didn't know what to think about Tocchet as a head coach, but I got to be honest, I am impressed with this guy. I really am. I know the last time that the last time that I remember him coaching was with Arizona. It was with Wayne Gretzky. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, he might have been somewhere. Yeah, if you told me where did he coach, that would be the place I picked too. And it was 15 years ago, probably, right? He must have been around since then. I don't follow that closely, but he must have been around somewhere. But there was a time when they hired Bruce Boudreau, and everybody was pretty excited about that. And then they gave up about 8 goals a game, and so he went away and brought in Tocchet. But we'll get to the Canucks in a second. Go with that Calgary game, I guess, right? A recap from last week.
Yeah, the Calgary game. To me,
that's why I'm here. The Calgary game. That's how it started. You told me. You called me.
I know. The Calgary game. That was brutal. As a Bruins fan, that was really, really brutal to watch. It was really ugly. I didn't think that the Bruins. I put that little teaser video out there where I called you out a little bit.
I remember.
It was a little bit of a trap game for me because coming off, these guys are, they're off for the All-Star break for 7 or 8 days. The Bruins had one of the longer breaks than from a lot of the other teams, but you look at that, and it's hard to come back in your first game. I think if you see that, if you take a look at that, you see around the league, Edmonton, they were going for 17 in a row, coming off the break and lost. A lot of those big teams like that. Vancouver, was it their first game against the Bruins?
No, they played Carolina a couple of days before that, and they won, but barely. So the Bruins were the second game off the break,
So I was wrong about that, but I think that first game coming off the break is really, really hard. You haven't practiced. The league doesn't let you practice.
I can see that.
And so you can't. There's no consistency. There's no chemistry for a game or two, or at least for a period or two, right? And the Bruins, you can make up for some of that with effort, though. And I just didn't even see a good effort in that game from the Bruins. I thought they left Swayman out to dry. Huberdeau, I think, had 3 points in that game. Markstrom played well with 21 saves. I think Pavel Zacha got the only goal for the Bruins, if I remember right. And as a matter of fact, one of your former guys, I think it was Kuzmenko, is that his name?
Andrei Kuzmenko, yeah, his first game, yeah.
So he scored. I think he scored in that game for the the Flames, and
I believe he scored the first goal. Actually, yeah, it was. Lindholm got traded for Kuzmenko, a couple other picks or whatever, but over the break.
Sure.
And Lindholm scored his first game too. I think when you talk about Calgary, they're supposed to be a pretty good team to start the year. They had a lot of players. I mean, Lindholm obviously was also the Canucks have Zadorov, the big defenseman who they traded earlier in the year to Vancouver. But Calgary was supposed to be a pretty good team, and they've kind of underachieved all year. And you call it a trap game, maybe it is. But now Calgary won in Boston, then they beat Islanders. They beat maybe who else? The Rangers? No, Devils. Excuse me, Devils. They beat the Boston, they beat the Devils, and then they beat the Islanders 3 in a row on the road. And they're a team that, when you look at the standings, they're like sniffing the 8th spot. So they're not terrible, and maybe they're coming into form a little bit from what they're supposed to be to start the year.
Yeah, I don't think they played well at the beginning of the season. I think they were supposed to be better than what they have been or what they've shown, right?
Yeah, they're supposed to be ahead of the Canucks for sure. I mean, definitely before the year started, nobody would have picked the Canucks to be that far ahead of the Flames if they had it all.
Well, they're a good team, and I think you're right. I think they're just starting to come into their own. Maybe they're starting to click a little bit now.
Yeah, I think so.
And you know what? They are fighting for that playoff spot, right? So there's a little bit of intensity that they have to bring to every single game. And,
for sure, that's definitely a thing.
And the Bruins did not show up for that game. And what's bothering me now about the Bruins, I watched Marchand. He had his take after the game the other night, and he said he wasn't concerned about the way they've been playing because they've been very inconsistent. But what I'm starting to see with the Bruins is they're starting to play down to the level of their competition. And not to say that any team is really, really bad, right? Even the Philadelphia Flyers are really starting to play well right now.
Boy, they've been good this year for what they're supposed to be.
Absolutely. And, I'm talking about, teams in the standings, where they are in the standings.
Yeah,
right?
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
And the Bruins are starting to, at least lately, they've been playing down to those teams and not showing up for those games, just like the other night. You take a look at that, and then you move to the Canucks game. And then the Canucks game was probably, in my opinion, one of the better games that the Bruins have played all season, especially defensively.
Yeah. Very bad timing, too. Yeah, I noticed that.
I mean, Allmark only had, and not to beat you up about this, but Allmark only had 17 shots in that Vancouver game, right?
Yeah.
How often do you see an NHL team only get 17 shots?
Now,
I'll say that. The Bruins only got 16 shots against the Capitals on Saturday. We'll talk about that in a minute. But talk to me about your Canucks, man. Like, what happened, or in your opinion, what happened in that game?
Well, here we go. So that's kind of why I'm here. I got called out, and now I have to stand up for what I said. So here I am. But I don't know that when you look at the goals, 2 shorthanded goals. So first of all, that's kind of an outlier. You don't see that too often. So not taking anything away from Boston. Obviously, they handled the game pretty easily. But the first goal was a Demko got a goal. The second goal was inside the offensive zone. The Canucks missed up on a transition pass. And then another shorty. And the third goal was even maybe cheesier. Hit 12 or 13 shin pads before it went in. I thought that Pasternak scored it. I think Geeky is eventually the one that ricocheted in. But
it was.
It's type of game that you don't worry too much about it. The big thing is in the last couple of games for the Canucks as well, in Detroit over the weekend and also today against the Capitals, is they're not creating a whole lot 5-on-5. They can get power play time and get some chances there, but the 5-on-5 game was really where you need to be solid. And they haven't done enough there over the last few games for sure out of the break. So I did notice also the game was 4-0, which, if you recall, was the score of Game 7 in the Stanley Cup when they played. What was that? 2012, I think, in Vancouver, 4-0. So I thought that was a rather interesting score. We're going to talk about it after that. So.
That was 2011, by the way, and it was in Vancouver, if I remember
Yes,
correctly.
the home team won the first 6 games, and then Vancouver lost game 7 at home.
Yeah.
And I'm also pretty sure that Boston won every game in Boston by, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 goals. And
Yes.
then the Vancouver won at least one in overtime and another one late in game 1 or game 2, and then got crushed in game 7. So
And let
yeah,
me tell you, every Boston Bruins fan is hanging their hat on 2011 right now because they could have been back there a couple times. Well, they were back there not too long ago, but that
yeah.
didn't pan out very well. So,
It's not the Canucks. They haven't been in the playoffs in 7 years, 8 years. So
well, it looks like they're going to go this year for sure.
I
You
stand
know,
corrected. They were in the playoffs. They had a nice run in the COVID year in the bubble, wherever they were in Edmonton. But other than that, as far as regular season, regular stuff, they haven't been in since, I don't know, 7, 8 years
right.
ago. So yeah, obviously a tough game. I mean, when you get up a shorthanded goal in the first minute of the game, and then a shorthanded goal later on, you're kind of chasing the game, and it just didn't go well. So here I am to take my lumps, I guess.
That's okay. We're not going to give it to you too bad. That's because the Bruins are 1-2 coming off the break so far. But you talk about that first goal that Marchand had. In my opinion, that was a fantastic goal. The way that he read the play. I mean,
For sure.
just to be able to position himself to even go to the net at that point, I thought that was a really, really good play. And then, Heinen is just been a bright spot. He's been a bright spot for the Bruins this year. They signed him late after the beginning of the season because I think they had to make some room, or they had to make some room with the salary cap or something to be able to bring him in. And he has been a staple in that third and fourth line, the bottom six. He's played very, very well. And an interesting stat that I saw the other day, I think it was during the Capitals game for the Bruins, is that I think up to December 14th, the Bruins were number one on their penalty kill. They were the number one team in the league on the penalty kill. But since December 14th, they've been 28th. So it was good.
Oh, wow.
It's been good for me, at least as a fan, to see them score a couple of shorthanded goals and not give up, because they gave up the first goal of the game to the Capitals was a power play goal for the Capitals. Jim Montgomery says that he's not worried about the penalty kill. I don't want to be worried about the penalty kill because I think they are still one of the best in the league. But it was good to see them being able to do a little bit like what they did last year, especially with Bergeron, right? Bergeron and Marchand always played very, very well together. So, And I do want to say this, and I think you can you'll be able to talk about this because you live out here. We're in Seattle Kraken land. Morgan Geekie has been fantastic for the Bruins this year. I did not see that last year. He's always around the puck. The puck just seems to find him, and he's a good young player, man. And I don't remember him being that impactful with Seattle.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I really don't remember the name. I know the name. I know for Tri-City Americans for one, but I don't. Yeah, I just don't. He's never a guy that you think about scoring a bunch of goals or anything. But you're right. He's always around the puck, and I mean, that the perfect example of that third goal of the Canucks game when he's in front of the net and it bounces off 6 shin pads and whatever it hit him eventually. It went in the net. And that's the kind of goals that are obviously are huge down the stretch and into the playoffs. So that's the kind of guy that can be huge for a team like that.
Sure, and it's really hard. It was a good game, obviously, for me as a Bruins fan to watch. It was fun to win, right, and to beat the Canucks. Especially where the Canucks are ahead of them in the standings. So they're the number one team in the league, and Boston was able to take them down, which was really good. But again, we took
76 points. Yes.
So we go to the Capitals game. After that great game against the Canucks, we have to play up. We're playing, it's basically best on best in the league. And then we go play the Capitals, who have really struggled this year. And we get 16 shots in the whole game. And only, I think you had texted me, 8 shots in 2 periods.
I'm actually cheering for the Bruins in that game for reasons that I can't speak publicly about. Just kidding. But the Capitals have been a weird team. They're not very good. When you look at their roster, they're pretty old for one. You got a lot of older guys, Oshie and Ovi, of course, who scored 5 games in a row now, by the way. But they're like, I think I read they're like minus 33 or 34 goal differential or something like that. Yet they're like freaking under 500. So it's kind of a weird it's something you don't really see. Usually the goal differential is a pretty good indication on where your record is, but the Capitals are minus 33, minus 34, I think today because the Canucks beat them. Yet they're 23-20 or something, and they're on the outside of the playoffs looking in, but they're not out of it by any stretch. So they've had a really weird year, and they won today. So, yesterday.
Again, it's a situation where I feel like the Bruins didn't show up. I think the effort was really lacking. They started out really, really poor in the first period. I think they had 5 shots on goal in the first period. Just not good enough against a team like that. And Charlie Lindgren, he's this 30-year-old kind of journeyman goaltender that they have.
Yes.
He kicked their ass, basically, is what happened. He looked like he was Patrick Roy out there at times, though he wasn't tested enough. 16
shots
or 18 shots on goal. And TJ Oshie's still putting it up. But, I heard the commentators talking about, the Capitals while I was watching the game, and I find it interesting. While Ovechkin is there, they're going to continue to try to make a push for the playoffs, right? So they're not going to sell off. They're not going to try to do some rebuilding because they want to do whatever they can for Ovechkin, right? I think he's got 60-some odd goals.
Yeah, the goal streak for sure, the goal record, yeah.
Right. He's got 60-some odd goals left to try to catch Gretzky, which, I still think that's a little bit tainted, to be honest. If he plays for 400 years, then he'll probably win. He'll beat that record. But, look at Gretzky, if you compare the points per game, I think that it doesn't even compare.
Yes, for sure.
But, good on them. TJ Oshie's obviously, I think he played in Seattle, didn't he? He played here.
Yeah, ex-teammate of mine, actually. I played for a couple of years, in Seattle, back when Murph coached us back in the day, yeah.
Sure.
So, it was fun. You wouldn't know me now. but yeah, it was cool. That was fun.
Let me ask you a question about that since how you brought it up. I had forgotten about that. I don't know how old you were then, but what was that like? Did you guys know that he was going to end up where he is now back then?
It was Bantam AAA, I think, and then maybe the first year midget, and then he moved away to Warroad, Minnesota, to play high school. Back then, he was the best player on the team, to be sure, no doubt about it. But he hadn't grown enough yet. He wasn't that big yet. I believe he's a year, I think he's probably an 87 birth year. I could be wrong on that. I'm 86. So he's a year younger than me. But he was not as big as some of the guys on the ice for that level at the time. But definitely he was the best player as far as skill, talent. Like, he was just super good hands, super good shot. He was just really, really, really in a league, better than the rest of us for sure. But once his body, then he moved away to Minnesota to play high school hockey, and then he went to North Dakota, and his body got bigger and bigger, and he was obviously what he's become today, a big force offensively, but also just a power forward that can do it all. But yeah, back in the day, he was very, very, very good, but maybe not. A lot of us would have guessed he would be that good if he had grown, and he did. Right. So when he got bigger, so yeah, for sure he was very, very, very good. I remember his dad. His dad was pretty fun to be around guy. If you recall, when they beat Vegas in the Cup, there was that moment when Oshie was, I forget who interviewed him, but something about his dad was very sick at the time with Alzheimer's and still in the stands, and that was a pretty cool moment because I knew his dad and him too. It was fun.
I remember that for sure. And that's interesting. That's a cool opportunity. We got a chance to play with him. And let's get back to this real quick. We got a couple of things left I want to talk about if we can. Let's just talk about the Bruins. Like, what do you think about their goals? To me, you've got Swayman and you've got Allmark. Allmark obviously won the Vezina last year. Unreal season for a goaltender last year. And now he's kind of flip-flopped with Swayman this year, and Swayman's kind of been more of the number one, even though they're alternating in the net game to game.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a better tandem out there right now than what the Bruins have, and I think their record is indicative of how their goalies have played.
For sure, yeah. I think I don't, from a Canucks perspective, there's definitely number one in Vancouver, Thatcher Demko, and then DeSmith gets one game every 4 or 5. But it's kind of a new thing in the NHL where 15, 20 years ago you didn't see split time like that. It's kind of a new thing. I think that it'll be interesting when they get to the playoffs to see how the Bruins work that out, because the old saying is, well, it's a quarterback saying, but if you have two quarterbacks, you got no quarterbacks. Well, if you have two goalies, you have no goalies. But um, what when the playoffs come around, and I don't know about last year, did the Bruins play one guy last year, or did they switch out when the
So,
Florida started to come back?
so here I have a take on this, and I'm glad that you brought this up. You want to talk about last year's playoffs against Florida. So I don't know if you remember, the Bruins went up, I think 3-0 in that series, or maybe they were
3-1, I think it
3-1
was.
in that series.
3-1. I believe it was 3-1.
Marchand could have won Game 5 in the last seconds. He had a breakaway and didn't
Breakaway.
score.
Yep.
So at that point right there, when they lost that game in overtime, right, it's 3-2. They had ridden Ullmark the whole way, and Ullmark looked off to me. And probably the last three games, from games 3, 4, and 5, he didn't look like the same person. I think he might have been hurt. I think there was something going on with him. I would not have brought Swayman in Game 7. I would have. If you're going to bring Swayman in Game 7, you might as well just run with Ullmark at that point.
Yeah.
I think
or do it in Game 6.
Bring Swayman in Game 6, and that's they didn't. They let Ullmark play Game 6. They ultimately lost. Bring Swayman in Game 7, and Swayman played well in Game 7, but ultimately lost. And Swayman, in my opinion, could be one of those goalies that could be very, very good for a long time, especially the way they do it now, where they alternate the net. So he's not playing 40 games in a season, right?
Yeah.
But last year, I think that's one of the two. There were two things, in my opinion, that Jim Montgomery screwed up, and that was bringing Bergeron back in Game 4. I think he should have let Bergeron stay out. I think it might have been Game 5. Let Bergeron stay out till the end of that series. You're up 3-1.
Yeah, it's going well.
It was working. Whatever you were doing was working. He's hurt. He was obviously hurt. Let him have a few more days of rest and try to win that series. Maybe you bring him back in Game 6 or Game 7. Or, but in Game 7, maybe, if you really, you need that spark.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
But I think that was one of the big things that they did, and then bringing Swayman in Game 7 and not in Game 6. I think it was unfair to Swayman, especially being a rookie. I think it was unfair to him to come in Game 7 after sitting all that time.
That's a tough first game to start in the playoffs, and definitely, particularly after the Florida had won 2 in a row, and they got the momentum going, and that's a tough spot for even if Ullmark's not playing, whatever he was, but that's just a really, really, really tough spot to bring a new guy in.
Exactly. So anyway, just to talk about that, I think the Bruins, I think it's a good thing that they have this going back and forth in the net, because I think as long as everybody stays healthy, you have a really good opportunity to get. It doesn't matter who's in the net, you can win, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think Jim Montgomery learned something last year. I don't think he would do that again. I really don't think he would bring one of the goalies in just to play Game 7. I think he would bring them in earlier if things weren't going right.
If you're switching goalies, do it earlier. Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
In playoffs, you don't really see goalie switches too often unless something's going wrong. Pretty much teams have decided they're number one by the time the playoffs start. So it'll be interesting to see who the Bruins start in the playoffs. If I don't watch as closely as you, but if they're switching every game,
right?
It'll be an interesting decision to see who starts Game 1.
I think right now it would be Swayman, but I got to tell you, if things keep going the way they are, Ullmark, with his shutout with the Canucks, and Swayman's lost the last 2 games that he's played. I think they left him out to dry a little bit, but at the same time, Ullmark's been playing pretty well. He's starting to come on a little bit. I think it's going to be. I think it'll be tough, but I think if the playoffs started right now, I think they'd leave Swayman in. But I think overall, the goalies are the reason that the team is where they are. And then because they've won so many games, I think the expectations. I think fans' expectations, Boston, right? It's like New York, Boston, Philly. It's kind of the same thing. There were a lot of boos in the stands in Boston during that Capitals game. And I've never been one of those fans to boo my team, but that was it was ugly to watch. And Bruins fans know what good hockey looks like, and that was not good hockey that they played. And So I think with the record the way it is, I think the expectations for the season have risen incredibly, especially with the fan base. And
For sure, I
so,
can see that. Particularly when you have 130 something points
oh,
last year. That's but like you said, everybody understands it might go down a little bit, but now they're playing well, and so now everybody's all back. Let's go try again then.
exactly. And I think I mentioned this to you. I believe there was a stat that I saw the other day that Jim Montgomery is like 97, 22, and 14, or maybe now he's 24 and 14, but he's almost has 100 wins in 2 seasons, less than 2 seasons.
Yeah,
It's
it's pretty.
incredible. It's
It really
incredible.
is. It really is.
Do you think that this team can keep it up? I know you're a Canucks fan, but do you think the Bruins can keep this going, or are we starting to see it crumble a little bit as we get towards the end of the season?
I think that like you brought up a little bit ago, it's hard to when you're first place and you've been first place for so long. It's hard to have that same intensity. Like you said, we talked about when you're playing Calgary. Calgary's hungry to win a game because they're battling for every single spot in the playoffs. So I think that they're, if you lose a few games, I don't know that that's a bad. I don't know that's necessarily a bad thing. You don't want to win every game you play, but I don't think that it's necessarily a bad trend. It's just that the situation that they're in, they're so far ahead of everybody that it's just going to be tough to keep that playoff mentality, intensity up and down the stretch. So, I mean, but as an outsider, why not? The Bruins are so good. The culture is so good. They win so many times that, sure, I would expect them to finish probably first place in the division, and if not, certainly second, and go into the playoffs. I mean, raring to go, especially after last year's disappointment. So, yeah, I do think they'll keep it up. I don't see why not. They have the team to do so. They're good in all aspects of the game, like you talked about the goalies, and so certainly they'll be a team down the stretch to be tough out the whole way for sure.
Just to finish this up, and I really appreciate your time, Matt. Thanks for coming on with me, and we're going to definitely do this some more.
Yeah, it's been fun.
The Bruins schedule coming up here. They got the Lightning, I guess, on the 13th.
Tuesday, probably.
Tampa's, let's see, 28, 20, and 5 with 61 points. They're 7-3 in their last 10, and they're third place in the Atlantic. Then they have the Kraken. The Kraken come into Boston. They're 21, 20, and 10 with 52 points. They're sixth in the Pacific. And then we have the Kings on the 17th that are fourth in the Pacific, and they're 24, 15, and 10 with 58 points. Just real quick, Matt, what do you think is going to happen with the Bruins and the Lightning, the Kraken, and the Kings?
I think the Lightning are another team that they've been so good in the past handful of years that they kind of, you don't want to say right off the regular season, but they're not too concerned about every single point. Maybe that some teams like Calgary or whoever's fighting for the playoff spots would be.
Right.
They're so veteran. They got so many veterans, Stamkos and Kucherov and those guys, and it's a big game for the division. There's the same teams in the division, though. You're trying to be number one, so you don't have to play Florida's a good team. You don't want to see them in the playoffs really, as you learned last year in the first round.
Right.
So you really want to keep the number one spot. So it's pretty important. I think that I expect Boston will be a decent favorite against Tampa Bay. Is certainly a big favorite against Seattle. Seattle's been down this year, which much to my delight. I got a lot of friends who are into the Kraken, so the Kraken are a team that way overachieved last year, and I heard a lot about it from all my buddies. And then this year they've kind of come back to reality, which has been nice to see. So they're a team that I think Boston should beat, particularly at home. And the Kings are an interesting team. Kings are very good. Kings have been a little down this year as far as so far in the year, but that's a team that nobody wants to see at all. They're a really good team. The Pacific Division has 4 really good teams. I talked about the stands a little bit, but Kings should be a real tough game for Boston. I think that's going to be a coin flip game. Kings are on the road, which helps Boston's case a little bit, but Kings are really good for sure. I see that game as being a 50-50 game for sure.
You talk about the Kraken. Now that I'm in Seattle, of course, I hear a lot more about them. I pay a lot more attention. I went to one of the Edmonton games this year. Got to see Climate Pledge Arena, which was a pretty cool place, to be honest.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah, they've done a good job with that. The Kraken, it's too bad for them because they didn't have the same opportunities, in my opinion, that Vegas had when they came.
Absolutely.
I don't know what the league was doing. I think it was very, very important to the NHL, and it would be to any league, that the team in Vegas do well. I think that's very, very important.
kind of a culture where if you don't do well right away, you might not have the same energy and passion around that thing. So,
Well,
and,
and
and I,
things can go very badly in a place like Vegas, right? And as much as I hate to say this, and I want this to come out the right way, they had that shooting in Vegas too, if you remember, and
yeah,
that was that first year, and that really solidified that team to the community. Do you know what I mean?
okay, yeah, okay, yeah. So you're saying, yeah, for sure.
I think it played a really, really big role. The fans really took hold of that team, and I think that's really what's kind of propelled them also, right? I don't
Yeah,
want to say that it takes a a catastrophe like that for something for that to happen for a sports team. You know, I don't want to overemphasize that point, but I do think that a lot of things really fell into place for that team.
broke the right way for them for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And then
and it's a very unique situation. You and I went there to Vegas for the Admirals, and it's a very unique situation in the arena. It's just kind of they do a very good job at being Vegas. They don't try to be anything they're not. The Vegas,
yep,
the atmosphere inside what is it called, T-Mobile, I think, or maybe whatever it's called,
it is
T-Mobile.
it's T-Mobile.
The atmosphere inside there is just really, really Vegas. It's very Vegas and very cool. I've been to a couple games there. Saw the Red Wings there in Tampa Bay there when we were there for the Admirals, and it was just a cool atmosphere. It's a fun place to watch a game for sure.
And I've heard from a lot of people that's an awesome atmosphere, and hoping that I get the opportunity to check it out.
Yeah, it's very cool. They put on a good show for sure. I think Boston's in Seattle pretty soon, are they not?
They do.
Are you going to check that one out?
I think the 26th of February. I think they come out, and
Yeah, okay.
so if things go right, I might be able to jump in and get to that game.
Yeah, the Canucks are in town a couple Thursdays from now. Whatever the 2 Thursdays from now is, they'll be in town.
So
yeah, the Canucks are in. Boston's in Seattle on the 26th.
Yep.
Which is a Monday. Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think the Bruins are they should end up in first place. I think they've got themselves in a good place for the remainder of the season. And for me, it's all about the playoffs. And for every Bruins fan, it's about the playoffs at this point. If they get ousted in the first round, they're going to start looking like the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we can't have that. So
all my buddies listen. Yeah, I got a good friend that's a big Maple Leafs fan, and I tell them that all the time. That's good stuff. Yeah, I like that.
I think going into the playoffs, if the playoffs started right now, it looks like they probably play the Red Wings. Toronto and Detroit are tied at 60 points, but Toronto's played one less game, so I think that puts them in the forefront.
The Red Wings have had a good year this year.
And Boston's
they're way
had a
better
hard
than
time.
expected.
Boston's had a hard time with Detroit. Detroit Larkin steps up and seems to score all of his goals against Boston. So
I think Detroit is one of the top teams in the league as far as scoring in general. I don't know if they defend that well, but I think they're definitely scoring a bunch of goals. And they've been like the Canucks, been out of the playoffs for a long time. Maybe they'll get back in. That'd be good for them.
Detroit's been down for a little while, right? And they're really starting to put it together. I think the culture of that team's starting to get back to where it used to be. They'll probably go on another one of those long playoff runs, like they were in the playoffs for like 25 straight years or something like that.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
They'll probably go on another run like that here pretty soon because it's Detroit and it's an original six team, and I think that's where some of those teams like the Rangers and Detroit and Boston, Montreal, even though they've been down for a couple of years, they really have. And they have an advantage, I think, over a lot of the other teams because, well, one, there's fans everywhere, right? I mean, Boston has fans everywhere. Detroit has fans everywhere. Montreal has fans everywhere. You see the jerseys all over the place at every game. It's not just that. I think it's the culture of what they've built. They've had, this amazing history. These teams have had amazing history of, winning, and all the players that have played. Rocket Richard and Bobby Orr and just. Gordie Howe, those guys have just built a culture for those organizations. And, there's a standard that you have to live up to if you play for that organization. It's like playing for the New York Yankees, right? There's a standard you have to live up to. I think that's what goes on in those teams. And, I think teams like Vegas and Seattle and, even Vancouver, that's something that they strive to be like, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's a good point. Chicago sucks this year, but they're going to be good with Bedard in
Oh,
the near future
that kid,
for sure. So yeah,
he's sick. He's absolutely sick.
yeah. What a great fortune for Chicago to have Kane Taves for however many years. Then they get terrible at the right time and they get first pick overall, and then Bedard's on their lap. It's just
Yeah,
crazy.
you couldn't
The
write
Canucks
Kane
haven't had a pick like that. Yeah,
better.
yeah. The Canucks can't pick anything like that anywhere close.
So let's just tie this up, Matt. Man, this has been a lot of fun for me. It really has. I really enjoy
Yeah,
doing this. It's been something a little bit different for me. I've been doing this by myself a little bit, and it's great to have you on. And I want to do this way more often. Let's just tie it up with a little bit of Super Bowl chat. What do you think about the game?
that was fun. I went to my parents' house and did all the stuff, and they had all the food and everything, and it was good. I think that I was cheering for the Niners, which is weird to say in my life because I was a Seahawks fan my whole life. And I'm a Seahawks fan, so it's kind of weird to cheer for the Niners. But I'm just over the Chiefs and everything. But got to give it to him. Mahomes is pretty incredible how he man. I just always finds a way. You think the Niners are going to do it? They missed that PAT, which proved to be pretty huge there in the fourth quarter. But yeah, it was a great game. Obviously, overtime, which the league wants, and they got it was in Vegas, and it was just a big spectacle, and it was a great game. But I was hoping for the different result. But it was fun.
Yeah, it was definitely a good show. I didn't think that KC played particularly well at all in the first half. In the second half, they were much
Especially
better.
the first half.
I thought Purdy was very good. Mr. Irrelevant, right? The last pick in the draft, which we
Yeah,
got to hear about over
yeah,
and over and over again. But it was a great
yeah,
game. I'd love to see a game going to overtime. It was fun. You're right about the PAT. Missing that PAT was a huge moment in the game, probably the
yeah,
moment in the game. And
yeah,
it's funny, you've got Butker on one end that's just unbelievable kicker, had been doing it for a long, long time, and probably could have hit one from 70 yards today. And then you have this other guy who probably could have also hit from 70 yards, but being a rookie, right? Like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
gets one blocked. So I don't know if that was on him or if that's on the line or what. To be honest, I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think it said the kick came out low, so it's kind of on him. But I mean,
But it
who
was a high
knows?
snap also. It was, I think, if I
Yeah,
remember right, that was a high snap, and it was
yeah,
difficult for him. But either way, it was a great game to watch. I personally am glad that Kansas City, out of the two teams, I'm glad Kansas City won. But Mahomes, man,
yeah,
he's starting to solidify himself as a Brady-like type of quarterback, and he,
yeah.
he's
That's his
impressive to
third, I
watch.
think, right? And he's still under 30 years old.
Yeah, he's 28 years old. I think they said he was
28.
tonight, and he's been to 4 Super Bowls already, won 3 of them, and it's
Yeah,
it's sick. It's you know what's in store. Is he going to be better than Brady? I've never been a big Brady fan. I go back. I was always a Patriots fan, but I was a Drew Bledsoe fan, and I didn't like the way Brady took over for him. Look, Tom Brady's a better quarterback than Drew Bledsoe was,
sure.
but I was a big Bledsoe fan, and I just didn't like the way that Brady basically got his opportunity through injury.
Injury. Yeah,
Yeah, but going back, could Mahomes be better than Brady? I mean, it's pretty incredible what Brady did in his career, and but Mahomes
I
is.
think.
If you look at the stats at 28 years old, Mahomes is a better quarterback.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I think Mahomes' only Super Bowl loss was against Brady in the Buccaneers, I believe.
Yeah,
I think that was Brady's when he went to the Bucks for the 1 year, I think, or 2 years, but whenever he won, I
yeah.
believe that was against Mahomes. I think it was pretty, if I recall, it was kind of a blowout too. But yeah, I mean, he just keeps doing it. The Chiefs were not very good for a long time this year. Everybody was saying
Right.
they're going to win the division but then after that lose right away. But believe the last 3 games today included, and then against Baltimore, and then who was the Buffalo before that? They were underdogs all 3 games, and they won all 3 games. So yeah, pretty impressive stuff. Good game to watch. Overtime's always fun, and then I raced home from my parents' house and did this with you, so it's fun.
Well, I really appreciate it, Matt. This has been a lot of fun for me. We'll definitely do this again, and hopefully very, very soon. We want to get you back on, and I like getting your take about the other teams in the league, and talking about the Canucks. Just kind of get a perspective from somebody on the West Coast that's not a Bruins fan. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, really fun. I enjoyed it a lot. Like I told you at the beginning, I was telling my wife a couple of days ago how it'd be fun to have a podcast, and then as fate would have it, the Canucks played the Bruins, and you called me out, and then here I am to take my lumps, and so yeah, it was fun. It was a good time. I enjoyed it a lot. So thank you.
Maybe these teams end up in the Stanley Cup Finals together, and we could be doing this on a nightly basis.
Well, I think the Canucks are host the Bruins in a couple of weeks. So we got a little chance of redemption here after that 4-0 loss. So
All right.
I'll be looking forward to that one. That's for sure.
Well, again, man, I really, really appreciate it. This is Dave again with the Bruins Forrcheck podcast. We did things a little differently tonight, which hopefully you guys enjoyed. You can catch us at Bruins Forrcheck on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can get us on wherever you listen to your podcast, you'll be able to find us. So really appreciate you taking the time, Matt, again. And I'll talk to you soon.
Yep, let's do it again. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
Take care.